What is up, everybody? Before we get into today's episode of It Takes Balls, I just wanted to share a little exciting tidbit. My wife and I wrote a children's book titled What's Wrong with Billy's Balls? What's Wrong with Billy's Balls uses golf as a euphemism for checking for testicular cancer and for asking for help when you believe that it's needed. We hope that this book will open up the conversation for survivors with their sons, but the story also applies to everybody in general. You can pick up What's Wrong with Billy's Balls on Amazon or on testiscancer.org. It's important to note, though, that proceeds from the book, no matter where it's sold, benefit the organization. However, purchasing it on testiscancer.org benefits the organization a little bit more. And while you're on testiscancer.org, make sure you pick up some of these cool shirts. We have a lot of educational materials that you can distribute in your community or show your support for your loved one or just your pride as a survivor. So again, What's Wrong with Billy's Balls, available now. Thank you guys so much. Let's get into today's episode. It Takes Balls is brought to you by our new sponsor, D's Nuts. Yes, you heard that right. If you've never heard of them, check them out at grabdsnuts.com. But warning, these are not your grandparents' peanuts. D's Nuts is really shaking up the nut game. They're gourmet, fun, and packed with flavor. Whether you're a fan of savory flavors like ranch, sriracha, or hot cheddar, spicy like ghost pepper, or if you have a sweet tooth like me, you like the banana pudding. D's Nuts has something for everyone. But D's Nuts aren't just about taste, they're about making a difference. For every bag, can, or piece of D's Nuts merch purchased using the coupon code NUTCHECK on grabdsnuts.com, you can save 10%, and another 10% gets donated towards supporting Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation. So the next time you're craving a snack that's both delicious and meaningful, reach for D's Nuts. Because when it comes to supporting Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation, it takes balls and it takes D's Nuts. Available at grabdsnuts.com, Amazon, and Walmart locations nationwide. D's Nuts, a delicious, healthy snack in a variety of fun flavors and making a difference one nut at a time. The stories shared on It Takes Balls are unique to the individual sharing. Always speak with your trusted medical provider for treatment options specific to you. Welcome back to It Takes Balls, presented by Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation. Today I'm joined by a survivor who likes to not just live on the edge, but kind of hang off the side of it. He's a rock climber. Kyle Broxterman is a testicular cancer survivor. Kyle, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I mentioned that you're a rock climber. Tell me a little bit about who you are.
I would say that encompasses a large portion of kind of who I am and my personality. I started climbing about 10 years ago, started in a gym, quickly found just a huge passion for it. And then started to take it outside and started to get into lead climbing. And then I got into trad climbing, and that ultimately leads you to mountain climbing and mountaineering. But I found my big passion with like big, long, multi-pitch trad routes where you spend pretty much an entire day up there, sometimes 22 hours car to car or tent to tent, involving, anywhere from 1,000 feet or 3,000 feet of vertical gain, over the course of the day, placing your own protection and then pulling it out, as the person follows you up. So it's really, really fun. It's a huge passion. I've got a Instagram channel based around it. I started a climbing podcast, so it definitely involves a lot of my life.
Yeah, that definitely takes balls. So shout out to you for doing that. So yeah, let's talk about your testicular cancer story. I mean, I know you were stage 1A. So what led you, what were like your symptoms before you got diagnosed?
Yeah, honestly, I just woke up one morning and I was just, playing with my balls and just kind of feeling them, not like doing a screen per chance. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to check for cancer. It was just kind of like, I was just feeling them. I just felt something that was different than normal. And I was just like, what the hell is this? And so instantly started just like going crazy and just like feeling it and really just kind of trying to get as much tactile information on it as I could. And then obviously pulled out the phone and just started researching all about kind of what I was feeling and kind of ruling out certain things. So
was testicular cancer something ever that you had been aware of, like even being a possibility?
No.
Interesting.
Yeah, not in my family. I've never known anybody that's had it. It was like it was never on my radar at all. I wasn't screening. I wasn't like, oh, I need to check for this. I'm in the right age group. I didn't know any of that, like nothing.
So when you were doing the research, like what kinds of things were you seeing and what was that doing to your mental?
Yeah. So, that's a great question. I think that, when you feel something unnatural, I think it depends on the person that you are, but it's easy to go one or two directions. You could either convince yourself that you're fine and that it's just, it's just a cyst or it's just something that's not concerning, or you could go the other way and just be like, I have cancer and I'm going to die if I don't do something about this, whether it's based off of real facts or not. And so for me, I don't know, my just initial reaction was like, this is serious. I need to take this seriously. And so I immediately just did all this research. And the main thing that kind of piqued my concern was that it was like firm. It was a firm mass, and it was kind of located in the center of the testicle instead of the top, which can be, I don't know exactly. It's just, there's other things that can grow on the top that are not cancerous, but it was located in the center. It was firm, and it was very clearly like separated from the rest of the testicle. Like the rest of it was soft, and you could feel that, and you could trace your fingers around the edge of the mass where it was like soft to hard. And so I was like, all right, like after reading all this information and like what it could be, if it was one thing versus if it was cancer, and like all the red flags were going off that it was something that was serious.
Yeah. And you definitely have to trust your fingers, being somebody who sticks them in crevices. So you knew you knew you were feeling something off.
For sure. Yeah. And like I said, I don't know if it's weird to say, but I touch my balls pretty often, just, not in a weird way, but it was something that was completely foreign and unusual.
All right. So, I mean, even if you weren't doing like a testicular self-exam, if you were familiar with yourself, I think that's the goal of talking about early detection is doing those monthly self-exams and becoming familiar with yourself so that when these changes happen, like yours did, you notice it sooner, which I think, you were stage 1A, and that's kind of like these stories are important to tell because that's like the goal of Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation, is talking about these kinds of things where you were able to get it out early before it spread.
For sure. And, honestly, so after I like did my self-exam and I was convinced, I was like, this is cancer. There wasn't a doubt in my mind. I wasn't like, oh, let's wait and see if it gets bigger or whatever, maybe it's, nothing to be concerned about. I was like 100%, this is cancer and I need to get this the fuck out of my body. And so I like immediately, I live in Nevada. The healthcare system here is pretty bad. And I was like, I need an appointment with a urologist like now. And like, I called that same day and they're like, oh, we don't have an appointment for you until like next month. Is that going to work for you? And I'm like, no, lady, like, you don't think you understand. I need an appointment today. And they're like, okay. It's like, I ended up taking like 2 hours with this lady on the phone. And then all of a sudden she was like, I don't really have anything. And then she's just like, oh, actually, appointment just dropped. Like, I have one for you in 45 minutes. And I was like, I'll take it.
Wow.
And so I showed up to the urologist the same day and got a ultrasound.
So they did the ultrasound right in the urology office?
Correct.
Oh, that's great.
Well, no. So I went up to, I'm sorry. Actually, I can't remember if I went to the urology first. I think I went to the urology first and that's exactly what happened. Urology first. She did like a exam. She was kind of like a PA, I think, or like someone, she wasn't a doctor. And it was funny. Like you work at a urology place and it, like for her to do the exam, she felt extremely uncomfortable. And I was like, you're in the wrong profession, lady. If this is making you uncomfortable. Yeah. And so then I basically had to like advocate for myself every step of the way. Like, the lady online didn't take me seriously. I walked into the urology place. These people didn't take me seriously. The lady who was doing the exam didn't take me seriously. I had to ask for the ultrasound. She was like, oh, you're probably good. I'm like, no, I want an ultrasound. Like, give that to me now. And she was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll give it to you. And then I went downstairs, because they have a radiology department downstairs in the same building. And so I went downstairs and got the radiology ultrasound the same day. So like, I just kind of like forced myself through the funnel of getting that scan.
Yeah. Did the radiologist tech give any like clues that they had seen something? I think they're trained not to. But. Exactly.
Yeah. So I like definitely asked, I was like, hey, so, do I need to be worried? Like, and she's like, I can't tell you, but someone should be in touch with you soon. And, I can't remember. Oh, that's right. I got the scan and then I was going on an ice climbing trip. Actually, this is why it was also urgent too, is because I was leaving for an ice climbing trip that Wednesday and I felt it on Sunday morning. And I was like, I need a scan before I leave because I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks. And like, who knows? Because that's part of the research too, right? You find out the testicular cancer spreads really fast, like super fast. And so that also just like raised the alarm more to like, I need to get answers on this as fast as possible before I leave for this trip.
How quickly did you get the results from the doctor who read the radiology?
It felt like years, man. It felt like years. I think I got the scan on the Monday or Sunday, and then I got the call. I think it was that Friday. It was either that Friday or like a full week had passed before I sat down with the doctor. And this whole time I'm like on this ice climbing trip trying to have a good time. And I'm just like stressing out or like, do I have cancer? Do I not? Should I be freaking out or whatever? And so, yeah, it was quite some time. It was probably between 4 and 7 days.
Did you clue your friends into what was going on?
For sure. I have one of the guys I climbed with was like a really good buddy. And so I told him before the trip. And I was just like, hey, this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm dealing with. Just so you know, if I'm kind of off and like distracted and not focused, like this is why. And then his buddy who was with him, I like told him in person while I was there, just because you're distracted, your mind is elsewhere thinking about the possibilities of like what you're dealing with. And of course, like once you feel like after I did the exam a bunch, I like my mind like built a neurological sensation connection to the testicle. And so I was like feeling it growing. I was like, I can feel it growing, you know? And so it really messes with your head.
And when you were like midway through this trip and you got that call, like what was it like to finish the trip?
So like, how did the call go, or what was it like to wrap up the trip? I'm confused by your question.
So you got the call and they said, hey, like there's this mass, and then you had to, it was a 2-week trip. So you had to finish the trip, or did you leave the trip early?
No. So yeah, I had to finish the trip. The doctor called me and said, hey, this is like, obviously the funny thing is they can't diagnose you until they do a biopsy or they remove it. But he said like, I can't diagnose you, but this is serious essentially. He's like the urologist or the scan, basically the tech said, malignant until proven otherwise. And so I was like, yep, that's what I thought. Like, take it out. I was like, I'm ready to take it out. I don't want to go for a biopsy. I don't want to have to like go in there and have you test it to see and then go for surgery again. I was like, they were like, oh, people, my girlfriend was like, oh, are you worried about losing it? I'm like, I got another one, like I was never really attached to it. And the second I felt the mass, I was already mentally ready to chop it off. I was kind of like joking like this. I think the same day I was like, can we just chop it off and be done with this? Like, cause that's the only way to really cure it. Right. It's like, get it out, get it done. Don't let it spread, because that's the big risk. It's when you're researching this stuff, you're like, it grows really fast and then it gets too big and then it spreads into your rest of your body. And that's when like it gets really serious. And so to have to just to know what it is in your heart and to not be able to just go into a doctor and get it cut out that same day, to have to like go through this political medical process of like convincing people that it's serious, having to wait for the surgery scheduler, like that whole process is such a mind fuck. And it's just like, it was so stressful to have to wait knowing what it is. Even before I knew exactly what it was. And after the doctor confirmed my suspicions, it was just like, it's really hard to just sit there and wait.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were in pretty good spirits, being able to joke about it. Were you able to enjoy the rest of your trip, or were you worried about what was going to be the outcome when you got back?
I feel like, I don't know if it's like related to being a climber, but I'm pretty good under stressful situations. And I tend to walk through life just kind of like trying to see the positive in everything. And just like, if things do go south, I try my best to find a humor. Like I got into a climbing accident, probably 4 years ago now, where I fell 30 feet, shattered both my ankles. My calcaneus turned to dust. I got 14 screws in a plate, a wheelchair for 3 months. And, obviously there was definitely, weeks of depression and like dealing with the mental trauma, but also at the same time, like, I don't know, there was like, for how traumatic that situation was, I like found ways to be positive through it and like find humor. And so there's a similar situation here where it's like, I still had fun on the climbing trip. It's just a matter of like presence, right? It's like our goal in life is to be as present as possible all the time. And climbing helps me do that for sure. But I just wasn't as present. Like that stress and that thought kind of occupied a portion of my mind.
Yeah. So let's talk about the orchiectomy. How soon did you have the orchiectomy after you'd returned?
So I got diagnosed, I believe it was January 4th, and then I got it removed February 4th. Those dates are a little rough, but it was basically 30 days from 30 days from the scan to the surgery.
So what was the surgery pretty easy for you after having had the climbing accident that put you in a wheelchair for 3 months?
For sure. Yeah. So having gone through that accident, the surgery, I wasn't really nervous about. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, I'm ready. Let's get this out of here. Funny thing though, when I got prepped for surgery and pre-op, the nurse was kind of new and she, did my IV, but she got my artery instead of my vein. She like stabbed through the vein into the artery and like she pulled it out. It was like squirting blood everywhere. I was like, God, that's kind of painful. So just funny. But yeah, I got in and the big thing, it's funny. They're like, okay, is it left or right? I'm like, patience left, you know, cause that would be the worst thing possible. You wake up and like the wrong one's cut and then you're extra boned.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. All right. So so you don't know what stage it is until after some scans. So what was it like after you, had your orchiectomy?
Yeah. So after the orc, like post-op, in terms of like personal experience, I guess the weirdest thing was the air that was trapped in the space. Literal like sloshing. You would like sit and stand and you would audibly hear the air and the liquid that's filling the space of where the mass of the testicle and the whole tube used to be, like sloshing around. So that was probably like the most uncomfortable part of that experience. And also they cut through the abdominal wall. And so like you have no abdominal control on the left side. And so like getting up, standing, moving around is like extremely painful. And also like there's sutures in there. And so if you do something too fast that uses that wall, you could rip your sutures. And so that was like a big concern for me. So like I had to watch that. And I had like panic attack. Well, not panic attacks. That's dramatic. I was worried about like sneezing or coughing because that would really like, I could feel it. I would be like, like trying to keep it from ripping. And there was one moment like I was driving and I was like about to sneeze and I was like, this is it. I'm going to rip my sutures and black out and crash and die. and I was able to hold the sneeze back. But yeah, that's definitely something to consider. It's just like the post-op of surgery. But I recommend anybody who gets an orc is to take a picture, have the doc take a picture of it. I have like a picture of the removed testicle that I have just like in my library on my phone. I think it's just kind of a cool homage to, what you left behind.
Yeah. And I wish I got a picture.
Yeah. It was cool to see like, luckily it had not broken through the outside of the testicular wall. And so you could just clearly see like a lump that was like sticking out of the main side of the wall. But yeah, I'm sorry. I guess I got a bit tangential off of your question. Will you ask that again?
That's okay. Yeah. So like the scan. So after you had your orchiectomy, did you go for a CT and X-ray?
I got the CT scan. I can't remember if it was directly before the orc or after. But yeah, I got the scan and it came back negative. I did blood work and a CT scan. And they recommend chest and pelvis. I just got the abdomen, like the lower abdomen, especially considering just my stage. And also most of it's about financial like costs, right? CT scans are expensive and like the chest and the abdomen are two separate charges. And so if you are worried about like paying for these services and stuff, if you do have like a stage 1A or lower, I personally went for just the lower because essentially where the testicular cancer would spread is like your lymph nodes around your kidney area first. And so if there's nothing there and the pelvis comes back clean, then your chest is 99% likely to be fine. And then the blood work covers the rest with the tumor markers.
Yeah, that's great. So stage 1. So what is survivorship in? Like you're still being surveilled?
I am. So I just came back. I just did my last 4-month scan. And that one came back clean as well. And I'll be going back in 5 months for my next one. I think if it were like further along the way, the scans are a bit more routine. But since mine was stage 1A and they came back clean, like super clean both times, I'm just kind of like 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. And then after 6 months, we'll talk with my doc and kind of see exactly where I want to go from there.
Do you experience the phenomenon called scanxiety, like around the times of your checkups?
You funny. It's actually, I've never heard of that, but I did probably like right before the appointment with the doctor after the scan, right before the news might be break to me. Like up to that point, I didn't even think about it. I was like, we're good. I'm not worried about it. But then right before the call with the doctor, I was like, wait a second, like he could tell me that it's relapsed. I'm like, fuck, that would be really rough. Like I really don't want that to happen. So yes, scan anxiety. It was more like scan results anxiety, 5 minutes before the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. So I mean, in survivorship, how soon after the orchiectomy were you able to get back out on the, I want to say rock, but I don't know what is
the rock. Yeah. Then that's a good way to say it for sure. Back on the rock. I'd probably say 3 weeks. It was like the first 2 weeks were definitely like hard to stand up and move around and like get from sitting to standing. I took a week off of work. But I'd say after 3 full weeks, I was definitely back at most of my activities. I'd say like fully recovered, probably a month and a half to like where there's literally no trace of any of the post-op.
Do you have to do any kind of stretching, or did you have to do any kind of stretching to kind of get your strength back in the abdominal region? Because I imagine that's pretty, I mean, I guess maybe arms are more important for climbing, but it seems like a full body thing.
It is a full body thing for sure. And honestly, no, I didn't really experience any sort of like loss of any kind. Once the sutures healed and the abdominal wall was like back together again, I was pretty much back to normal.
Nice. All right. So yeah, I mean, mentally, it sounds like you're pretty solid. I mean, any side effects of anything, whether they're physical or mental, since you're...
No. Yeah. I mean, I think the only other thing we didn't cover before I jump into that is just the option to do preventative chemo. That was offered to me and I denied it. Just because especially of the fact that it was stage 1A and it's like the lowest possible chance. And also I just didn't want to put that in my body if I didn't have to. And so I just it is kind of a roll of the dice, I guess, you don't really know. But considering my particular circumstances and everything, I just decided that it wasn't the right course of action for me.
Yeah, totally fair.
But in terms of like survivorship and emotional or effects, honestly, not really. It kind of was just a bump in the road. And I really attribute that to because of how fast I caught it. Right. It's like if it had gone longer, then everything would have been more complicated. The risks would have been higher. Then you do have to do chemo. And so that definitely would lend to a lot more stress and things to go through. But because of where I caught it, I luckily did not have to deal with too much.
Yeah. And like I mentioned, like that's really the mission of Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation. And, unfortunately our audience is people who have already been diagnosed, but I mean, do you talk about it at all on your podcast where the audience has, maybe not had testicular cancer, so now they can be aware of something to look out for?
Yeah, I mentioned it on the podcast, I think briefly, but I didn't actually do like a PSA, but on my Instagram channel, I definitely was very vocal about it. Definitely PSA, like I even showed the picture of the testicle and everything just for shock factor. I think it's important to spread awareness. I think that the one thing I found, especially posting about it on Instagram, was how many other people have been diagnosed. Like so many people are like, hey, I'm a single nut climber. And it's funny, actually, on my Instagram handle, I say single nut climber and there's like a little ribbon next to it. And it's kind of a play on words because when we climb, we put in nuts to protect ourselves in the rock. Essentially like I don't know how else to describe it. It's like a constriction, like a piece of metal goes into a constriction and then it holds in place and it'll hold your body weight and more. And so, as a single nut climber, it's just a play on words there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm very vocal about it. Every time I go in for a scan, I'll post a story, keep people up to date, and people who might not be aware of the story might come across it. And yeah, I get people reaching out to me all the time. Like, thanks, man. I'm checking, I'm touching myself. I'm doing scans, like just trying to get people as aware of it as possible.
Amazing. So tell me about your podcast.
So my podcast is called The Climbing Majority. Essentially, if you are inside the climbing world, climbing media is very focused on what's happening at like the edge of the sport with professional athletes. And there's a lot of people, but in general, there's a small group of people that dominate the media. Alex Honnold, Tommy Caldwell, just those are two main ones. There's tons of others, and you hear them and what they're doing all the time. But they're, especially now, like with the Free Solo movie coming out and like climbing gyms everywhere, like lots of people are finding this sport. And that's pretty new. Climbing was pretty restricted and hard to come across back like in the 70s and 80s. It was only very few select people that were doing it. And so now there's all these people climbing. And the cool thing about climbing is that you are putting your life on the line. It depends on, where you're climbing and what kind of discipline you're doing. But those kind of moments lend to very like life altering experiences and adventure stories, and like it shapes who we are. And so you don't have to be a pro to have crazy stories and to be able to chat about climbing in a very, philosophical or deep way. And so our whole podcast goal is to share the stories of the non-professional. We're bringing the stories back to people like myself and other people in my world who just have a passion for climbing. We've been doing it for about 3 years now. And we've had 74 episodes now. And I think the cool thing about it is, if anybody's listening and they're like, oh, I'm not a climber, but there's so many episodes where we talk about things that transcend climbing. And there's like philosophies and like ways of thinking, like trauma that you go through and how to deal with trauma, drug addiction, like these stories that we talk about. While some are specific to climbing, the ideas and stuff are applicable to people who don't climb as well.
Amazing. And you mentioned your Instagram as well. What are the handles?
It's Brox_rocks. So BROX_ROCKS. And the handle for the Instagram is the.climbing.majority.
Awesome. Kyle Broxterman, thank you so much for being on It Takes Balls.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
For more information and resources for your testicular cancer journey, visit testicularcancerawarenessfoundation.org. You can also follow us on social media at Testis Cancer. We're on Facebook at Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation.